And welcome to What's Next Beyond Service. This is our 29th episode entitled What's Up, Doc? And you'll see why here shortly. So our guest today is Jesse Hamilton. Jesse and I became connected on LinkedIn, and I guess it's probably been about 2 years now. I've kind of lost track. But Jesse and I have talked about things back and forth on LinkedIn, and I always have a pregame call before I bring somebody on to interview, so we can get to know each other a little better. Just kind of talk about the flow of what the interview will be about, and I like to try to keep those calls to about 15, maybe 30 minutes. Well, I didn't even realize, and I'm sure Jesse did, but by the time we were done talking, it was close to 2 hours. It was like an hour and 49 minutes, I believe, which was incredible. And, he indulged me, I'm sure, but it was a great conversation. I mean, that absolutely could have been the interview. So I'm very much looking forward to our time here with Jesse today. So just a quick little snapshot here on Jesse. So Jesse served in the Army for 8 years. He was an artilleryman, and then from there he was a drill instructor, which is a big deal for enlisted personnel in the Army, in the Marine Corps, in all services, because you're selected for that, and that says a lot about you, because there's career progression that comes with shaping the force. Folks that come through boot camp, when you're enlisted, that's the path you come, and you need sharp folks there to do what's required to get those guys and gals ready to enter the force and go on to their occupational training, and then, to service in the fleet or, wherever they go, depending on their branch of service. So he did that. He was obviously successful in that endeavor. And then from there, he went overseas and was a foreign army advisor in Fallujah. That's in Iraq. Most folks probably know that. Fallujah was one of the tougher places to be in Iraq. There were two very big battles for Fallujah, the first and second battle, but it's notoriously a kind of a tough place to be. So he served there again in that capacity, where he was advising and training his counterparts on counterinsurgency tactics and then executing combat operations. And for his time there, he was awarded the Bronze Star and also the Army Commendation Medal for Valor. So, those are things that aren't handed out, right? Those are absolutely earned. And so, that says a bit about Jesse right there. Post his time in the military, he has been in the financial industry. He had various positions, jobs for about 10 years. He is currently a doctoral student at the University of Pennsylvania, which is an Ivy League institution, incredible college, university. And so we're going to talk about that as well. Jesse, welcome aboard.
Thanks, Scott. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's absolutely an honor to have you on board here today. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk a little bit about your background, your military background. If you want to talk two things prior to that, then that's certainly that's up to you. But we'll talk about your time in service. Maybe why you served. What was the impetus for going in? Tell us about some key things that you learned in the military. Maybe there's some things that you did individually or you did as a team that you want to talk to. And then anything else that you feel is important about your service or service in general. So then from there, we'll transition to your military transition, your leaving service, that process. We'll get into that, what that was like for you. Any advice or recommendations that you have that you want to share with folks. And then from there, we can talk briefly about your time in the financial industry, and then we'll roll into what you're doing now at UPenn, the degree you're pursuing, what your plans are, postdoctoral studies, and then we'll talk about your volunteer efforts as well. So that's kind of the template for folks so that they know what's coming. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to you, and let's talk about your military background, uh, and what, again, if you could start out with maybe your impetus for serving in the military.
Yeah, so I enlisted at 18 in the U.S. Army because that was my best option at the time. I didn't know it at the time, but my family's military history goes all the way back to the American Revolution, through the War of 1812, the Civil War, World War I, World War II, and here I am.
Yeah, that's incredible.
So,
it really is.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, when I was in the Army, I didn't know that. And it wasn't until I picked up my great-grandfather's autobiography when I realized that the military history goes all the way back. So it's something that I'm proud of, and I'm proud and honored to have continued that family tradition. So yeah,
that's a huge tradition, by the way. I mean, if you think about that, and the fact that you were able to trace that back. I remember you telling me that was it your grandfather that had the book where he had kind of cataloged some of your history? Is that what that was? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah,
based on our conversation. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah. So, but I joined because it was my best option at the time. And I had intended to stay active duty in the Army for 4 years, get out, have some money to go to college through the GI Bill. And that was supposed to be end of story. So I was getting ready to exit the Army in the summer of 2001. And we all know what happened in September of 2001. I am from the greater metropolitan New York area. I was struck with a deep sense of patriotism. And while I did choose to get out of active or off of active duty, I chose to stay in the reserves. So I continued my service as a drill sergeant in the U.S. Army Reserves. I had a great mentor. His name was Master Sergeant Paul Karpovich. He was my drill sergeant mentor. He showed me the ropes, taught me how to be a drill sergeant. And he volunteered to go over and help train the newly formed Iraqi army in 2004. Unfortunately, my friend Paul was killed in December of 2004. And in a very emotional response, I volunteered to take his place. I'm a young staff sergeant at the time, and I didn't hear anything back from Big Army. But around 6 months later, I got my orders. And a few months after that, I found myself in I was a staff sergeant in an O3 position. They clearly needed all the help they could get.
Right.
And I was advising a company of Iraqis and serving as the assistant S3 to the battalion. So big job, bad city, young kid. And it was a rough job. And Fallujah was not the nicest place in the world. When I got back after a year serving overseas, I decided that was it. I had done my time. It was time for me to exit the military, to finish up college, and to pursue a career in the corporate space, which is exactly what I did. So I spent around 10 years in finance, in a variety of roles. I learned a lot. Learned a lot about business. Learned a lot about markets. Learned how to be a civilian. And a few years ago, decided that I didn't want to do that anymore. So I made a jump to academia, where, as you noted, I am a doctoral student in philosophy.
Yeah, you've absolutely landed quite well in that regard. And so a couple of things here, Jesse. First of all, condolences for your friend there. Obviously, it's been a while, but we didn't chat about that. And it's a very personal thing. And sometimes that's hard to share because you don't know how it might hit you when you're talking about it. I share that with you because, most of us that served have lost folks in combat or even in training or just freak accidents. Those things happen, but it's never easy, right? And then the other thing is, God bless you for raising your paw and saying, send me. That's a big deal. I mean, you did that initially by joining the Army, and the sacrifices that come with that. But then you up the ante and you were willing to go forward. And that says a lot about you as well as an individual. And you were serving as an infantryman, right? You said a 03. Were you saying you were in a 03 billet or you were with the infantry? I wanted to clear that up just in my mind.
Yeah, so it was an infantry battalion. I was
Right.
13 Foxtrot, so I was a forward observer by training.
Right, as an artilleryman, yeah.
But they were this was 2004, 2005. They were trying to get to build the Iraqi army as quickly as possible and get as many advisory teams attached to these battalions.
Right.
So yeah, that's how I found myself in an 03 billet.
Right. Yeah. And you said you were the 3 Alpha, so for folks that might not, understand the terminology there, that's the operations section of that unit. And it's all about operations, right? Logistics are important, but if you don't understand what's happening operationally, all that's for naught. I mean, it's like the center, it's the hub, and then all the spokes kind of go into operations. So you're doing a lot in operations. You have real-time operations, you have future ops, you have plans, there's a lot to consider. So yes, that's a big job. And then lay that over where you were in time in Fallujah, again, probably worse than the Old West by a couple magnitudes. But yeah, so thank you for your service just in general, and thank you for how you went about it. Again, that's very admirable. So, okay, Jesse, while you were, are there any stories about that you want to share, and maybe even some funny stories about being a drill sergeant? Because I know I went through OCS, but you have like a boot camp, if you will, at Officers Candidate School, and it's hilarious when you look back. Now, when you're going through it, there's really not much funny about it, right? But a little bit of time and distance, then you remember some things that happened that were humorous when it came to what a drill instructor said or someone's response to something that was going on. Do you have any humor from that regard? I'm just kind of interested.
Yeah, so I mean, I loved being a drill sergeant. I think so I'll start off with the professional takeaway. So
Sure.
I was a really young drill sergeant. I think I was 23. And I was close enough to being that trainee that I remembered basic training quite well. And what I remembered from basic training was looking at my drill sergeants and saying, wow, these are the quintessential soldiers. They are an image of perfection. And I remember being 23, about to watch my first platoon of privates hop off the cattle car, and where I would start yelling at them and thinking to myself, like, I know what it's like to be there. I know what it's like to look at the drill sergeant and have this image of the drill sergeant. And I didn't feel like that person. And what that made me realize was that when you're looking up at someone, it's really easy to see them in a light that they might not even see themselves. And you're probably closer to that, ideal or that step than you might think. So funny stories. I mean, I, you know, drill sergeants have certain ways of, you know, making people feel, you know, just really bad about themselves, and
And that's part of what that's intentional,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, you know, if someone thinks that they're doing a good job with something early on, even though they might be, you don't want to let them onto that. You don't want soldiers who are cocky. You know, the whole concept is to break the person down and build the team up.
Right.
So, I mean, I have hung on to some of my phrases that I used as drill sergeant, like play stupid games, win stupid prizes. That's one of my favorites. Smoking and joking is another thing. It's what we accuse privates of doing when the drill sergeant isn't looking. You know, they're you know, not taking things seriously.
Yeah, I remember hearing good initiative, bad judgment a couple times when I was going through. Yeah, yeah, it's, you know, it's funny, and I would imagine probably as someone that goes through boot camp or OCS, the individual probably remembers a lot more about what I'm asking than the drill instructor or sergeant instructor might, because they're busy on task with their job, right? So, and there's one of you, and there's, you know, 50 or whatever the number is of them. So, yeah, I've got some funny stories, but you know, we can save that for another time over a beer or two. But okay, well, so now you've done your time in the Army. You served your 8+ years, and you came to a decision point, and you said it's time for me to go. So let's go ahead and start talking about that now, in terms of your transition from the military. You know, we all have reasons why we serve as long as we do. And then at some point, you know, it's time to go, you know, and whatever the catalyst is for that, we have to leave what we've become accustomed to. And changing from the military and coming back into civilian life, it's a process. Not everyone does it well. You know, not everyone's really prepared for it. And then it kind of catches them off guard as they're going through that gauntlet, right? So there's a lot of different ways that transition can end. So let's go ahead and take some time and let's talk about your transition, you know, the process that you took, and if you can share with us that story, and then of course anything that you believe you want to share with folks who will be transitioning advice wise, that'd be great.
Yeah, so one of the things that I didn't mention was while I was in college and I was a reserve drill sergeant, I was also doing ROTC. And in the back of my mind, I had intended to stay in the Army, go back on active duty, and become an officer. Iraq completely changed that, and I realized that I wanted to get out. You know, the officer path, you know, green to gold, we call it. I think that was the program. But that's a very predictable path. If you're, you know, prior service, if you've been enlisted, if you're in the reserves, you know exactly what to expect. You know, you're going to be a second lieutenant. Then at some point you'll be a first lieutenant, captain. I didn't know anything about the civilian world at all when I was getting off active duty, and when I decided to get out of the military for good. So it was really, really clunky. It's really difficult for me to say what went well and what didn't. And one of the reasons why, I think, is because I love what I'm doing now, and I tend to forget all of the many, many mistakes that I've made. I wish I documented all of my mistakes so I could put them in a handbook so that people know just what is the absolute wrong thing to do. Okay, well, Jesse did this. It was catastrophic. Therefore, I'm not going to do it. people would probably be much more successful if they avoided all of my mistakes. That said, I've reflected a lot over the years, just about what I do think went well and what didn't go well. So there's just a few rules, I guess, that I pass along to veterans who are transitioning either from the military into college or from the military into business. So I think that these rules probably, and there's probably, I wrote down 5 in my notes. I think there's probably more, but I do think that they apply generally, and I think they apply broadly, not just to enlisted, but probably to officers as well. So are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so this is America. You can do whatever you want. So don't let anyone tell you what you can and can't do. Look at me.
That's huge. I mean, it's true. It's absolutely true. We all come from, different backgrounds, but I think that's a common denominator. That path may be, more crowded in some areas. There may be different obstacles for different people, but that baseline that you just laid down there, I believe that's absolutely true. This is America, and what you just said, I think it's for everybody. Thanks for saying that, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, look at me. If anybody who had seen me at age 16, society would have had really low expectations for what I was going to do. And my high school was full of people, students, faculty, administrators, telling me what I can't do with my life. Same thing when I was in the Army. There were people who told me, oh, soldiers, when they get out of the Army, they fail. So just stay in. And had I listened to those people in my high school, if I had listened to people in the Army, I probably wouldn't have taken on any risk. I wouldn't have done anything. So I do think that everyone can do what they want to do.
Yeah, Jesse, I believe that with my heart and soul. We didn't really share too much about this when we talked, but I come from a rather disadvantaged background. My folks split up when I was very young, and it was hard. We didn't have much, and my mom had been married for 17 years, never worked. They got married right out of high school. My brother and me, then folks broke up, and so it was hard, right? And same thing, I was blessed that I had people that cared for me. And I had men in my lives over time that saw something about me. They saw an interest in me. So I was blessed that I had a couple folks who were, feeding me wisdom, even though I didn't maybe realize it at the time. As I look back, it's amazing how fortunate that I was that, people took an interest. But to your point, there were absolutely people in my life that were telling me something very different, whether it was friends, whether it was people that, I looked up to and wanted respect from, and didn't get it. And that's when you're young, that's, that it crushes you. And so absolutely, you could take the wrong path. Somehow I wound up where I am today. But again, getting back to that baseline, it's because of where we live and the opportunities that are out there. You just got to kind of figure out how to get to them and do good things.
Yeah, and that's, Scott, thanks for that. That's a perfect segue to the second thing that I tell people who I know who are transitioning, which is be skeptical about what other people know. So there's a lot of people out there who think that they know more about things than they actually do. So don't take advice from anybody who's willing to give it. So here's an example. So there's a lot of privates out there who converted their summary grade Article 15, non-judicial punishment, to a field grade Article 15 because they chose to listen to the E4 who had done a couple semesters in college, who claimed to be an expert on UCMJ.
That's right.
We don't expect privates to know about UCMJ. And I don't think that soldiers who are transitioning or service members who are transitioning should expect career officers or non-commissioned officers to know anything about civilian life. Maybe they do, but we shouldn't expect that. On the other end of the spectrum, we shouldn't expect civilians to know much about the military at all. In fact, it's probably safe to expect that they have false beliefs about the military.
Great point.
So, yeah. So there's be skeptical of what people tell you.
Yes, I mean, I think that's that hits center ring, right? Center target. There are all kinds of folks that are willing and can't wait to share with you what they think they know. And yeah, we in the Marine Corps, those folks that you initially spoke to that want to give advice to their fellow soldier about what to do at an NJP or how to go about it. And we call them sea lawyers in the Marine Corps, right? But yeah, those are the guys you want to stay clear from. But and some of these folks are even well-intentioned, right? They think,
Yep.
it's not that they want to give you bad information. It's just the information they give you isn't relevant because of their perspective, or they haven't gone through it yet, and they're just telling you what they think instead of what they know, which is very different, right? And it just like when you and I talked, you mentioned speaking to the sergeant major, and he was kind of giving you that advice about you need to stay in, and that's a great recruiting discussion, but that's not helping you in terms of kind of figuring out, well, what's in this for me at this point, and what do I want to do, and what are important things I need to know, Sergeant Major? You need to know that you should stay in. So, okay, well, thank you very much. It's so yeah. There are plenty of folks that are out there. It's just like investing, right? A lot of advice on investing, but it's not. What's good for one isn't good for the other, and you have to know that. And a lot of times folks learn that the hard way. So, but absolutely. And so what's that next thing, that number 3 item?
Yeah. So if to just like to recap,
Sure.
you can do everything or anything that you want to do, but you have to be skeptical about who's going to help you get there. What do you do? So thankfully, there are a lot of veterans out there at every company, at every university, and a veterans network is perhaps the most valuable asset that someone can have. Connect with veterans who are where you want to go, because they're there already and they've proven that they've gotten there, so they know how to get there. So talk
Absolutely.
to them. If you want to go to a certain college, talk to veterans there. If you want to go to and work at a certain company, talk to the veterans there. They'll be able to help you. Connect with them, ask for guidance. One great thing about being a veteran is that we're tight. We know we have a shared experience. If someone has stayed on active duty for 4 years, there's a few things I know about that person. They've been able to get up every morning or enough mornings not to get in trouble, to shave, to work hard, to not get in trouble. And yeah, that's somebody who is less risky for a company. It's less risky for a college.
Right. There's kind of expectation management there, right? You know what to expect from those folks, and absolutely everything you said about what veterans bring is so true. And just I know I'm interrupting here. I apologize, but yeah, networking is a big deal, and a lot of folks just don't get that. So probably the sooner you understand the importance of networking, how to do it. If you know where you're going to go, target that group, that industry, or if you're looking to go to school, what do I want to do school wise? What universities, and put your feelers out there and start talking to those folks in that veteran network. And I'd also add that you need to branch outside of that too. And LinkedIn is a great tool. I I don't own stock in LinkedIn. I like LinkedIn, and I talk a lot about it. In fact, that's how you and I connected. That's a fantastic tool for networking. So that same philosophy and process that you just talked about can be used with folks in industries that aren't veterans but have information that's good to know. And so connecting with those folks, in a professional way, obviously, and trying to learn as much as you can. Even looking to do what are called informational interviews, so you're finding out about the organization and maybe a career path. So it enlightens you and it informs you on a number of things, right? Is this really the thing I want to do? Is this the organization that I want to pursue a career in, or a job? And so, yeah, that the networking thing, that's invaluable advice, Jesse. I absolutely agree.
And here's something that the military does a lot of good things. Networking is not one of them. And I don't even think that that we would refer to it as networking in the military. We'd call it brown nosing. And it's something that in the military is just, culturally frowned upon. So here's a hypothetical situation for you. Private Hamilton goes up to Lieutenant Colonel Duncan and says, "Hey, sir, can we grab coffee sometime?" And Lieutenant Colonel Duncan is probably shocked, because what is Private Hamilton? Why would Private Hamilton, why do you want to grab coffee? Well, sir, I just want to get to know you better. I want to hear about your experience. I want to build a relationship with you. Perhaps, Scott, you would indulge me if that were true. But most company commanders, most battalion commanders, their first call is going to be to the drug and alcohol NCO, and they're going to say, "Look, you got to come down here and you got to test this dude right now because he's hot." And so networking is going to be really unnatural. It was really uncomfortable for me when I first started doing it, but it's crucial. And the first step is to find that first mentor who will point you in the right direction, who will teach you how to network, who will introduce you to other people. It's not going to be that first mentor who gets you your first job, or who gets you into the college that you want to get to. But it very well might be somebody in that person's network who will be crucial when you look back and say, "Why was I successful?" It was because that first mentor introduced me to key people that they knew.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another great point that, you're folding in there is mentors. If you've, sometimes you have mentors and you don't even realize it, right? Because they're advocating for you and they're doing things. But having mentors throughout your career is important. They help you in so many ways. And when I was a student at Command and Staff College as a Marine, a lot to take in, a lot to, it was the best school that I went to in the military. I went to a number of schools in my career, but the common theme that I remember was it's all about relationships, building relationships. The folks that you're in school with at Command and Staff College, chances are you're going to see them down the road in your career, whether it's in Fallujah, whether it's at a training exercise. You'll have that common bond from being in school together, so it's amazing. All the folks that came in and talked to us, Jesse, we had Supreme Court justices, we had titans of industry, you had generals and admirals from our military, from foreign services, and almost to a person, I don't know what they were told, hey, you can say whatever you want, but make sure you talk about building relationships. I'm kidding, of course, but that was a very common theme with all of those folks about how important that is, building those relationships, because it's about people, right? And that hierarchy that you explained is dead on too. PFC is not going to go up to a company commander and talk to them like they're back on the block, right? That hierarchy exists, and there's a distance there, right? So it's just the mechanics of how that doesn't work. It certainly works, or maybe it has a better chance of working in the civilian sector, right? Because there's different expectations, and we don't act that way, inside the military. But yeah, so I'm sorry, I'm kind of bleeding over your point there, but yeah, that mentorship thing is huge. That's probably all I really want to say in all of that.
Yeah, it's super important, because that mentor is going to be able to explain what's important to civilians. There are going to be certain things that we do in the military and that are really important in the military. And if you do them in the civilian world, those things actually might harm you. So I'll give you an example. So in the military, we are humble. We're taught to be humble. We're taught to take responsibility when things go wrong, and to give credit to our teams when things go well.
That's right.
In the civilian world, you need to take credit for your accomplishments. That's not to, say that you have to have this big ego, but you have to explain, and this is especially important in interviews, what role you played when your team was successful. I'll give you a quick, Scott, I'll give you a quick story. So when I was in my corporate job, I knew a veteran who was a fantastic captain in the Marines. I encouraged him to apply to this job. They did the interview, and one of the people who interviewed my friend called me up and said, "Hey, Jesse, I don't know what you were thinking. Why did you send us this person?" And I'm like, "What happened?" And he said, it sounded like his team really lifted him up, and that he really played absolutely no role in the team's success. It sounded like, they were basically carrying this person. And I immediately knew what happened.
All right.
My friend was giving credit for all of the successes that he might have talked about in the interview to his team. And what I said to my civilian friend was, look, that's just something that really good leaders in the military do. They don't take credit when things go well. They take responsibility when things go poorly. That's just how it is. If I thought that he was going to take complete credit for everything that his team did, I probably wouldn't have sent him your way to begin with, because it probably would have spoken to his lack of proper military leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. And it would also say something about you as well, right? In terms of, kind of getting back to their initial question was, why did you send this person? Yeah, if you sent someone that was an egotist, then, that might look bad on you as well, even if he was very capable, right? Because those people can actually be corrosive, and there's reasons why. But no, you're exactly right. And that even happened to me when I transitioned in my first interview that I had. And, I thought I was hitting out of the park, because that's who I was. Right. And at some point, I think I shared this in my last interview. At some point, the lady that was interviewing me was like, well, it's very apparent that, you had a great team, and, blah, 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 but my question, she goes, let me ask you a different way. And she kind of refocused it, like, knocking on the noggin. tell us about you. What did you do? And then it's like, oh, geez, that's a different, it's kind of a different question, right? And then I think you're right about people being humble, about, leaders, you acknowledge when folks do well, and it's about we, and it's not about me, and you're not used to talking about yourself. So that's something that's learned, and it's difficult, because it's cultural, right? That's anti-culture, meaning, it's not about you in the military. So how are you going to be able to speak well about you? Some of that is definitely learned, and mentors can certainly help in that area too. But that it's a real thing. It absolutely is.
Yeah, and it's slightly related to that is the self-deprecating humor that many of us in the military have. That's not always that common. It's certainly not common in academia. I have a self-deprecating sense of humor. When people ask me why, I say I'm not witty enough to go after anybody else other than me. And I'm a soft target. And I can crack jokes about myself nonstop. But every once in a while, I'll get an email from one of my students, or it'll come up in my evaluations where they say, Jesse, you should really be more confident. You have a lot of reasons to be confident about, this or that. And I love my students for that, but that is something else where just something to be aware of.
Yeah, no, absolutely. In the military, if you don't have a sense of humor, and there's a different types of humor, right? Obviously, but if you don't, it's going to be a hard life. Yeah, because you need that relief, right? For a number of different reasons, and the comedy relief is a big stress reliever as well. Plus, as I talked about earlier, some of the humor that comes with time in the military is huge. And I think you even talked about this whether it was on this call or whether it was you and I talking a couple of days ago, in our pre-game call. When you look back in time, you tend to remember the good things. Certainly there are bad things that happen, but you seem to easily go back to the things that were good memories or funny memories, right? And the humor is tied into all of that for sure. Yeah, I know it is for me. I love humor. Sometimes folks don't get my humor, and that's okay too. But at least I'm having a good time, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's important too, right? So one of the things for people who are transitioning, I think that believing fear of failure is going to be a headwind. In the military, when when leaders fail in combat, there are severe consequences. People die, people are injured. Those are serious. And I think that at least when I was getting out, I was really scared to fail. People had expectations of me. I had expectations of me. I had a lot of people telling me that I was going to fail. What if I do fail? They're going to be right. It's going to be humiliating. And my drill sergeant in basic training told me something when I was taking a PT test, I believe. He yelled at me and he got in my face and he said, "You're not going to die." And he was right. Here I am. I didn't die. And I must have passed the PT test. And so regardless of what a service member chooses to do, whether it's go to college, whether it's go to a trade school, whether it's enter into corporate America, whether it's start a business, if you fail, you're probably not going to die. if you don't succeed at your first attempt in college, you're not going to die. If you hate your first job, you're not going to die. If you don't like the industry that you're in, you're not going to die. You always have a chance to do something different. And you have the skills as a service member to be really resilient and to see something that you don't like, something that you want to change, and you have the discipline, you have the project management skills, you have the motivation, and hopefully you have the network so that if you find yourself in a position where it's not looking too good, you know how to get out of that position, pivot, go on and succeed, or in another domain.
Right. Yeah, Jesse, that is the gospel truth. I mean, and it's very foundational, because we all fail in life. And you're right, there's a very big difference between failure in the military and failure, in the civilian sector, because of consequences, because of career implications, in the military. Not saying that on the civilian side that, failure is cool, because there's issues there too, but it's not the end all be all. It's not you fail and you're done, right? And you got to give yourself grace. You absolutely have to give yourself grace with this thing called failure. And I remember when I heard fail fast the first time, I'm like, what the heck's fail fast? This sounds fail. To me, it sounded negative. But then the more I listened and understood, what that meant, I thought, actually that makes sense, right? Because you don't want to spend a whole lot of time in failure, or maybe not seeing it for what it is. Not that you shouldn't have stick-to-itness and the desire to accomplish, but you have to have your head on that swivel and understand where you are in progression, to say, okay, well, yeah, that's not going to end well, so let me shift gears, like you said, and I'll pivot to something else. And whether that's something as simple as pursuing a degree and not doing well in a class. I failed a class in college. I went to school before I went into the military, but as a young guy, I thought, oh my God, I'm going to get kicked out of the university because I failed a class. I failed it because I was working as well, and I didn't, and I should have put more time into it, and I didn't, but whatever, it doesn't matter why I failed. What matters is I failed, but I did exactly what you talked about. And here I am today, you and I are having a conversation. I didn't die back when I was in college because I failed a class. Yeah. And I didn't understand, at the time what that was all about. And I think that is so true, because when people leave the military, a lot of folks, it's just like anything else, no one has a crystal ball. And there's a lot of things that you don't necessarily understand in terms of what's coming your way. And it's okay to be afraid, right? Because that's kind of baked into our DNA a bit, the fear of the unknown. But it's how you go about handling that fear, the things that you talk to, again, that I think are foundational to success in anything you do, right? Is understanding that, you can make it.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. My other system went down here. Give me 1 second. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, any setbacks, most setbacks are going to be temporary.
Yeah.
Very rarely do you find yourself, I mean, it's hard to conceptualize, making one mistake that really just completely derails you, excluding like legal things and whatnot.
Sure.
But yeah.
Well, those, those 5 things that we just talked to, I think, the experience, your personal experience, and then, shaping that into advice for others. I think, I appreciate that. And that's those are meaningful things that folks who are leaving service should absolutely be considering. So just, hey, based on time, I just looked at my watch. We're about 52 minutes into this. So, based on that, and I told you this would go by, it would go by quickly here. These things always do, these interviews. So let's do this. Let's talk briefly about your time in the financial industry. I'm sure, you decided at some point that's where you were going to go. If you want to talk a little bit about that or anything within that 10-year, window about the financial industry. And then once we get through that, let's jump into what you're doing now at UPenn, where you're looking to go. And then I also want to touch on your volunteer work with Action Tank. I know you're the chief of staff there. And this, for folks that might not know, it's a nonprofit. It's staffed by veterans that are coming together to do good work for folks in the community where they serve. So I want to be able to talk about that too. So
yeah. So really quickly about finance, when you think of some of the skills that veterans bring, stressful environment, ability to make quick decisions, ability to lead, these are all core competencies on trade floors, whether you're actually trading securities, stocks, bonds, commodities, whatever, or you're on a sales team. So I think it is transitioning to finance is a really natural path for a lot of veterans, and a lot of the big, most, if not all of the big finance firms, Goldman, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, they all have veterans employee resource groups. And those are crucial to understanding the company, understanding how to frame yourself in an interview. And so any veterans who are interested in finance, try to find someone in that employee resource group. And that goes for if you want to get into consulting, if you want to get into manufacturing at any of the big firms.
Right.
So, all right. So philosophy. So, all right. So let me start out by saying I do think that people have a misconception of what philosophers actually do. I think they envision philosophers as sitting in our armchairs in the ivory tower and issuing instructions on how people should behave. And so yeah, there are some philosophers who focus on applied issues, dealing with practical ethics. But philosophy, at least the philosophy that I'm interested in, is a lot more rich than that. And so just broadly, what philosophers aim to do is understand the world and what our place is in it. We try to figure out how things, conceived in the broadest sense of the term, hang together with things conceived in the broadest sense of the term. So we ask questions like, what exists? What is the nature of that thing? How do we know that the thing exists? How do we know what we know? Who knows it? It's pretty interesting, but I think that your viewers may be interested in the specific type of work that I'm focusing on right now, which is related to justice in the military, or justice and the military.
Right.
So one way to think about justice is the creation of an environment that fairly distributes the benefits and burdens of living in a society. The military obviously fills a key function in our society. It's national defense. But is the military, as an institution, just? Do soldiers bear too much of the burden and receive too little benefit? If so, what needs to change? Along the same lines, oftentimes, as we are well aware, the military is drawn into situations overseas that may not be directly connected with US national security. How do we think about the military's role in the world? Are we asking too much of our soldiers? Are we asking enough from non-soldiers? I don't know any of the answers to these questions. I don't know if I ever will, but those are some of the things that I am working on right now.
Right. And I mean, who better than, somebody with your experience, right? When you go back to the genesis of who you are coming into service, the experiences that you had and the jobs that you had, going and being in combat, you've kind of saw a lot about the military. You saw in terms of, your basic occupation, what you do as an artilleryman, it's a very important job. When you're sending rounds downrange. In fact, I had this conversation in a previous interview. When you're shooting projectiles, they need to land where they need to land, right? They don't need to, like what we see right now in the Ukraine, which is, that's a whole nother conversation, but you hit the target. There's an intended target, and that's where that round needs to land. So that's very important. But then you also look at what you did shaping individuals. That's a cultural thing, that you're taking people who are civilians and you're bringing them in and you're, again, shaping them so that they can go forward in the military and perform at the right level, perform functionally, so they'll succeed. And there are folks along the way that continue to help in that process, but it begins with guys like you, guys and gals like you that were drill sergeants, and making sure that we get the right folks through to serve. So you served at that level. Then you went overseas. You were in combat. You saw the good, the bad, and the ugly of what it's like to be in an environment like that. How people come together, how people can fail, the dynamics of being a human in conflict. You've got that experience, right? And then you also have your time in the financial industry, which is a whole, like you said, there are some similarities, but I'm sure the things that you saw in the finance world probably, shaped and colored some of your opinion about how Americans are, how we live our lives, what's important to us as Americans and as individuals compared to how the rest of the world functions, which is very different here in America. And, a lot of folks might not necessarily clue into that too much. I think, a lot of what Americans do, they do in a bubble. And it's not that we're bad people. It's just, we don't have a very good understanding about how the rest of the world outside of Europe lives, and, the difference in cultures. And it's huge, right? And we need to, I feel, and here I'm on a pedestal here, but I feel that we need to understand those things, and we need to be, willing to give the same grace that we would expect folks to give us, with other folks. So yeah, all those things that go into, what you're talking about in terms of in philosophy and, what you're doing. I can't think of a better person to do what you're doing based on who you are as an individual and your experiences. And I think it would be awesome to be a student in your class. And, so, I know I shared with you, there are professors that I remember. I remember their names. I can remember their, I can see their faces as clear as day. And I can remember individual classes that, because of that professor, the way they delivered, the cadence of their voice, you could tell they gave a damn about what they were talking about, and they wanted you to understand it and then have a decision to make on the information that they're providing to you. And I can see that you're absolutely that kind of person. And I think now you're doing a service to the people that are, that are listening, and hearing the things that you have to say. So that's a big deal, Jesse. And I'm glad that you're in the position that you're in, because I think you're going to make a difference in a lot of people's lives educationally. And we need professors like that. We absolutely do.
Well, thank you for the kind words, Scott. I think that looking back, it's probably a lot better to be a student in one of my classes now than a private in my basic training platoon, because I can't make students do push-ups.
That's right.
But I'll make privates do push-ups until I start sweating.
That's right. Hey, there's some truth to that. Absolutely. But so, hey, I know we're right just a minute or two past the hour. So because of that, let's just quickly talk about what you're doing volunteer-wise. I mentioned that here a minute or two ago. What can you share with us about, the organization, what they're doing, and then, your play and all that?
Yeah, sure. So, I volunteer with an organization called Action Tank. We're a group of veterans who tackle what we consider to be tough problems in the Philadelphia area. We attempt to leverage all of the skills that we picked up in the military, whether it be project management, relationship management, and apply them to pressing problems. So in the past, we have focused on issues related to opioid addiction, to gun violence, to food insecurity, lack of tree canopy in a lot of the areas in Philadelphia. And this year, we are focusing our efforts on what's called period poverty. Period poverty is when women do not have access to menstrual hygiene products and education, and this is really bad. It forces some women to miss work, to miss school, and it has a compounding effect. It makes people who may already be in a bad situation in a much worse situation. So right. I'm really proud of the things that Action Tank does.
No, absolutely. And, we talked about this a bit on our call, but, and this is a common theme that comes up a lot in these interviews, is that people who serve, whether it's people who have served in the military, people who serve as law enforcement officers, firefighters, paramedics, that service to the community, that when we finish our time in those career fields and we move on to that next objective, that next thing we do in life, kind of a common thread with all of us is our sense of community and our sense of wanting to make life better for others, right? I think it's a natural thing to volunteer. And when we talk about, we didn't necessarily talk about this in our discussion today, but in general, when you talk to veterans, when you talk to folks who have transitioned, you miss certain aspects of your military life, right? And it boils down to the people, the camaraderie. That's hard to replicate at that same level outside of the service. At least we like to think that, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. But I've found, for me personally, and then again in doing what I've been doing here now for almost a year with this podcast, but certainly in running, I ran a few nonprofits and have talked to a lot of veterans, and a lot of things that we have in common is that sense of purpose. When you leave the military, what is that sense of purpose? Where do you go to find that? Finding it in a job, you can do that, but finding it in yourself in terms of, hey, I need to have hobbies that are constructive. I need to spend time that's going to come back to me and help me treat myself well. And finding purpose, and a great place to do that is doing exactly what you're doing and volunteering your time and effort to organizations that help people. The goodness that comes with seeing that smile or seeing, a bad outcome being averted because people cared, they intervened, and they did what was necessary to make things better for that person or the group of people, whatever it is. Volunteering, I think, is huge, and volunteering has helped me. The goodness that you feel from helping others is hard to quantify, and it's a win-win-win. Everyone wins when we realize that part of why we're here is to help others, and I can see that you get that big time. So yeah, hey, thanks for the work that you guys are doing there in the Philly area, because just like any other big city, Philly has its issues too, and you guys are addressing that, and you're doing more than talking. You guys are taking action, and I guess that kind of rolls into the word action tank, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Have a think tank.
yeah,
Action.
good nomenclature there. That's right. Yeah, words matter. So, all right, well, Jesse, this has been a very interesting, hour plus in talking with you. I thank you for your time today. For I know you've got a lot going on, and just like everyone else that comes on the show, appreciate the wisdom and advice, and expressing the things that are important to you, so that folks understand who are coming into this part of their life when they leave the military, and also for veterans who are still working through transition, because transition is much more than just leaving service. There are many aspects to transition, and we tend to be transitioning in life as we move forward. So it's always great to have people like you who have empathy for that, because they've been through it, and you can talk to failure and success the way that you did. I think there's much to take from what we discussed today, and it's going to be beneficial to folks that hear that. So now, that being said, we have a few folks that are still on. So as I mentioned earlier, Sarah, who normally handles this part of the show, is not here today. So I'm going to do it, and I hope I can do it, at least as good as her. Probably not, but we'll get through this. But before we go into this, do you have a few minutes, or are you pressed time? Okay, cool. So, all right. So again, we have a couple folks that are still here. So now's the time that we switch gears, and we offer to people that have been watching and listening, do you guys have any questions for Jesse? Any comments, anything that you'd like to talk about? And I just ask that, do what David did, raise your hand, and then I'm going to tell you to go. So David, what you got?
Thanks, Scott, for calling me up. And Jesse, thanks for your time today, and for all of your words of wisdom, and hearing your story is always important. Telling our own individual stories is always so cathartic for ourselves when we're trying to help others. And hearing yours is special, and I appreciate that. Thank you. You spoke so much, by the way, that it's just so resonates with me. And in that, I appreciate your service and sacrifice to our country, and the way you're giving back now to the youth that hopefully coming up and making a difference in the way that you have up through this point in your life. A few of the things that you spoke about, transition and interviews, I was giggling actually through it, because I've been there. I'm not a veteran, but I did 20 years in law enforcement and retired a little bit ago, and now trying to move on and figure out what I'm going to do when I grow up. But here I am. So the transition to interviews, giving the credit to the team was something I did in the first several interviews, and failed at every single interview. And I think that's something that is really important to talk about, especially with the younger folks that you're teaching, and folks that we come in contact with, whether our own kids or our kids' friends. And that whole, it's the humor, the self-deprecating humor is not only what I've run into, it's just self-deprecating in general. And I've learned that was a huge wall for me. I appreciate you talking about that. So I don't think anybody else that's never served in a uniform, whether it be military or law enforcement, understands the idea of servant leadership and what that means. Everybody in the corporate world is always looking out for themselves and trying to build themselves and their company for their greater stock options, and really could care less about the folks below them, or helping bring them up to potentially be their boss one day. You know, I think that's a fear of a lot of folks in corporate leadership. And so thank you for speaking to that. Networking is awesome. The Go Giver, have you read that before?
I have not.
Oh man, highly recommend it. It's all about the main character is the connector. And the book is awesome. It's a short read. Can do it probably in a 2-hour workout. So go for a run and throw on Audible and you're good to go. Go Giver is awesome. I think you'd love it. And the whole idea with networking that I learned is ask somebody for a cup of coffee, as they do in some of these transition assistance programs. And you're never too small and they're never too big. And that's something that I learned through this transition process. And you speaking to that networking, I really appreciated it. Reinventing yourself is something that we're all trying to do when we get out of whatever service we're in. And I think you're such an awesome example, and I really appreciate you sharing your journey that we can all learn from. Because I think so many of us are still trying to, like I said, figure out what we're going to do when we grow up. And you're never too old to find it, but obviously the younger you find it, the better off you are going forward. I'm still in that transition process, and it's like learning a new language, honestly. You can't use the acronyms that we use, and you can't use the words and the phrases, because somebody's in this culture is going to find out that maybe that wasn't PC enough, or whatever the process was in the corporate culture. So thank you for talking about that. And the afraid to fail concept. What I've learned recently, and I'm, by the way, huge catastrophe for me, is the afraid to fail concept. I'm in that zone all the time. And but what I've learned is you're only one failure away from winning. And it's hard to get there, but thank you for speaking to that. I think that's a huge factor and a huge hurdle for a lot of us to overcome. And your servant leadership through serving others is important. And I appreciate you talking about the Action Tank program. And I look forward to connecting with you offline after this process. And,
Yeah, absolutely.
By the way, I'm about 20 miles from you.
Cool.
I'm one of the only other East Coasters in this network. So let's not make haste of that and waste that opportunity. I live in Hopewell.
Yeah, I can smell a coffee connection coming on here.
And I just applied to Penn for graduate school. So
let's connect. Yeah, let's chat. Let's chat.
We got lots to talk about.
Yeah.
So thank you again. Thank you for your time. And I know I don't really have any questions because you spoke so eloquently and put it all out there. And really not a whole lot left to ask other than adding my own 2 cents. So thank you for all that you do. I appreciate it. And I wish I was in your class.
Thanks for the kind words.
Yeah, David, thanks so much. That was awesome. Okay, it looks like Paul has his hand up there. What you got, Paul?
Several things for you, David. What was the thing we were just speaking about?
One more time.
I'm sorry. What was the name of the book?
Oh, the Go
speaking
Giver.
About
the Go
Go
Giver.
Giver.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Say that again, please.
The Go Giver. I'll put it in the chat so you have it.
Thank you. This is that maybe have a little different take on failure. I think that everybody experiences failure, but you only become a failure when you stop trying to experience, when you stop trying to move forward. And so I don't refer to people as failures unless they have just surrendered. And that's pretty rare, actually. With regard to philosophy, I have looked for 40 years for a job as a company philosopher where I get paid by the thought. I wound up in law enforcement. And one bit of good news, and that is that sometime overnight, soldiers got into an elevator to go up into a building, and the guy who was in charge of the elevators through the power or whatever shut the power off to the elevator and trapped them inside. And as far as I know, they are still there.
Oh, geez.
Because they have no way to get out. The lights are battery operated and they're going to fail soon. The camera that took the picture of these 7 soldiers inside this elevator suggested that they all knew that they were being watched because they were all looking up toward the camera, and somebody took that picture. And so I just view that as a bit of good news. Nobody got hurt. Nobody got shot at, and you know, hopefully they will surrender. The other thing that has occurred is that 2 Ukraine females, and I don't believe they were military, I believe they were civilian, took into a Russian soldier, and he surrendered his weapon. And they asked him why he was there, and he said he didn't know. And they asked him what he was supposed to do, and he said he didn't know. That was at the 7th day, and he had had 4 days worth of food with him when he left, and nobody bothered to restock. And so he was rather happy to have surrendered. To the extent that one of the young ladies handed him her cell phone and said, "Please call your mother and tell her you're okay." And if that isn't an act of humanity, I don't know what is. Thinking not just about this person and the risk involved and all of the things associated with combat, but thinking about what the going through. That young man was in the Ukraine with a rifle in his hand. And so I kind of view those things as good news, and I admire the strength and the spine of the people who have returned to Ukraine to fight the Russians. It's very easy to just avoid it, and they're not willing to do that. They just refuse to do it, and so they
very
stand
true.
up and fight. And you know, I've listened to a couple of the ladies, and I know Scott has too, talking about what, and they're down in the holding the little baby in her hands, saying is what's important. And that just touched my heart.
Absolutely, Paul. And
thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing the information that you did. I wish you well in your doctoral program. I spent 13 years in university, and my mother accused me of being a slow learner. And she had 2 doctoral degrees and was one of the first females in the country to have 2 doctorates. But that was a long time ago. So anyway, I wish you well.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Paul.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and just, you know, kind of to some of what Paul was talking to, for those that may be interested, tomorrow at 11 Pacific, 2 o'clock Eastern, Sarah, again, who's my partner here, I'm filling in for her. So it's an open mic session for her, coffee and conversations on Fridays. So it's going to be an open mic, which means, you know, we'll talk about what's on people's, you know, on their thoughts, on their hearts and minds. So I think, you know, this Ukrainian situation, the war in Ukraine, is something that we'll absolutely talk about. So, you know, Jesse, if you're available tomorrow and you want to jump in on that, you know, I'll send you the link. You know, if you show up, great. If not, that's cool too. And I know it's a last minute thing for you, but let me see. Yeah, I see Tim. I see you're on the call. Do you have anything that you'd like to share? Any questions or comments? If not, that's absolutely fine.
Tim is a buddy
Okay.
of mine from Action Tank.
Oh, cool.
And I know he's at work right now.
Right.
I begged him to come and lob me some softballs, thinking that, I need all the help I can get. So
Yeah, he's in the dugout trying to find the right
yeah,
ball to
yeah.
throw, huh? No, that's fine. I mean, if he's at work, he may have stepped away to do something. So if he's here and has something, that's cool.
I'm here, but you
Hey,
both
there he
did an
is.
excellent job covering the topics. Appreciate you including me and calling me out. A ton of great stuff. This was a great conversation. Maybe I don't have any questions at the moment, but I can share something that really struck with me. Something that Jesse said was the need for veterans to sort of connect with those veterans who are where you want to go. And that's been really important for me throughout my career. So not to take away the spotlight, but just to share. So I was an enlisted veteran, like Jesse, also enlisted in the Marine Corps at 18 years old, right out of high
Right.
school. Served 4 years in active duty, got out, completed my bachelor's degree. Now work in the financial services industry. But there was a lot of sort of carving my own path because it's not a traditional route. Majority of those who I serve with are either in the blue collar industries, typically work with their hands or using a lot of the skills that they learned in the military, which is great. But I chose to take a sort of unbeaten path, and there wasn't. I sort of found that there weren't as many enlisted veterans that had gone this path. So it was important to connect with those who had those like Jesse. Jesse has been an amazing mentor to me over the last 3 years or so. Brought me along a lot of the way. So just wanted to say, can't thank him enough. Use this opportunity to say thanks, Jesse. It's been great being a mentee of Jesse, being a friend of his. Most recently, like he mentioned, he invited me into Action Tank, our veteran-focused nonprofit in the Philadelphia area. So that's been a really rewarding thing for me to serve on the over the past year. So just want to say thanks to you both for having this forum. This has been great to be able to listen in. I am at work, but fortunately was able to attend for the most part. So this has been a real pleasure, and looking forward to the recording that goes up.
Yeah, and Tim just assumed a new role in Action Tank. Tim leads all of our service projects. So now Tim, when we go out and we do work, Tim is my boss. And he gets to leverage the one core strength that I have retained from the military, and that is lifting heavy things and moving them from point A to point B without griping too much. And I have to emphasize the too much, because at the end of the day, I'm still a private at heart, and I love complaining about things. So.
Boy, there's some truth to that, right? They always say if the troops aren't griping, they're not happy.
Nope.
But anyway, hey, Tim, thanks for the kind words. And it's nice to, when we talk through the things we talk through, it's meaningful, but it's absolutely even more so when folks like you can come on and share and kind of provide some bit of, I don't want to say truth, but you're providing the proof of what's been discussed, right? Because you've seen what's happening, you see what Jesse's doing and what the impact that he has had on you, both from a mentor standpoint, but then also someone that you want to emulate in terms of the good things that they do. And then you turn around and do the same, and so you're validating, I guess, is the word that I was kind of searching for. You're validating the goodness in all that was discussed. So thank you for your time today coming on. Thank you for your service as a Marine. Absolutely. Semper Fi, brother. I'd like to connect with you. So yeah, so let's do that on LinkedIn. Let's connect and So that's a good thing. And thank you for what you're doing in your city too. It's absolutely a meaningful endeavor there. Okay, well, I think that's probably all we have question wise. Jesse, again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your service to our nation, your continued service to young people, folks who are seeking to learn, who want to be educated. And again, thank you for what you're doing there in your community to help people live better lives and to help them, along their journey in life. So thank you again. And the last thing is thank you for your friendship. We've definitely developed a friendship here over the past couple of years. I always absolutely enjoy your perspective and I learn a lot just through our time together here on LinkedIn. So look forward to future discussions with you as well.
Yeah, and absolutely. I deeply appreciate our friendship as well. I appreciate it's an honor and privilege to chat with everybody here today. Thanks, David. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Tim. And importantly, thank you, Scott.
Roger that.
I would have
Okay.
one more comment, if I may, and that is that, David, you and Jess are close by, 20 miles apart.
Yeah, I'm in Washington Crossing in Hopewell. So we're George Washington crossed the Delaware about 220 some odd years ago. And if he's in Philly, we're about 25 miles apart.
Yeah, that will be an incredibly time spent, and because Scott and Sarah and I got together for coffee one afternoon and had an absolutely wonderful time together. We've known each other virtually for, I don't know how long, maybe a year or whatever. But to be able to sit down and talk with each other face to face and just share thoughts and ideas. And there was no agenda. There was no brute force leadership of any kind. We just shared, each of us, what was on our hearts. And I continue to do the same thing because it really and truly is worthwhile. And thank you, Scott, for all that you do. Again, I really and truly appreciate both you and Sarah beyond measure.
Well, thank you, Paul. We feel the same way about you, and we're all in this together, and we all have different beliefs, thoughts, but the thing that we have in common is that we're all human, and that we should be, good enough to want to spend time with each other and to learn, and that's a lot of what we're trying to accomplish here. We need to have dialogue in this world to make it a better place. So, absolutely, Paul. All right. Well, everybody, have a great remainder of the day. Again, thank you so much for your time, Jesse. And we'll see everybody on the next episode. Take care.